Hello, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our presentation of the DeMatteis School of Engineering and Applied Science. In our presentation, there will be three participants. My name is Gerda Kamberova. I'm professor and chair of the Computer Science Department. We have Professor Scott Jeffries, who is also Hofstra alumni. And distinguished leader in the industry. And Professor Marco Romanelli is our new assistant professor in our department. His area of expertise is in cybersecurity and trustworthy artificial intelligence. And he will actually present very interesting findings from his own search that are very relevant to the discussion that we have right now. So with this said, I welcome Professor Marco Romanelli. Just to say, his undergraduate degree is from University of Siena in Italy, and his PhD is from École Polytechnique and INRIA in France in computer science. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for the very nice introduction. The presentation that I'm about to start brings together, well, the main topic of this symposium, the year of election, and the correlation with education, which is what we do at this university. And one of the main topics of my research, as Professor Kamberova introduced, I've been working mostly on trustworthy AI, which is a big umbrella. And two very important subtopics in the area are privacy and fairness. I'm going to go deeper into what privacy and fairness are in a few slides. And I would say the outline of the talk as a very general beginning, where I'm going to sort of like convince you that these topics, these problems, these issues are not only important, but sort of like permeates all aspects of our society. And these issues are sort of like exacerbated by the growing use of AI in every aspect of our life. And then in the second part of the talk, I'm going to try to show some of the cutting-edge work that I've done recently, and hopefully I will convince some of you to, get into the topic. And if you're interested in learning more, do some kind of research on that. My door is always open, so I'm happy to hear from anyone who might be interested. Okay, so let's start with some points, some facts. So everybody knows that AI has seen a rapid and uncontrolled advancement in the last few years. We went from basic classifications and problems in compression and image transmission back in 2013 to 2015. Then 2014 was a big big year, a leap year for generative AI, and now everybody has probably heard of ChatGPT, and we know that this is here to stay. It's going to be embedded in education. It's going to be embedded in the job market, the way CVs are selected, and so on and so forth. So we cannot overlook this aspect. So one may ask, what is important, for a teaching institution? What is important? What is fundamental that should be done to prepare students to this new age that is coming? And the idea is that on one side, it's important to educate on what is already there and how we should use this, how we should, take advantage of these tools in a way that is respectful, ethical, and at the end of the day, helps us for the good. But on the other side, is also important to, at least for us, educators, especially in scientific, in a scientific field, it's important to go beyond that and try to create the next generation of innovators. And for that, it's very important to go much, much deeper than just using these tools and query ChatGPT and have fun with the answers that come out. It's important to understand what is under the hood, how the engine really works. And so something that we want to do, I'm actually going to start from the next semester with a newly designed course, is to try to equip students with fundamentals. What are the problems in statistics and in information theory or probability theory that we can sort of like reconnect to, and use those solutions that are there, are very sound and mathematically strong, that we can also bring into machine learning to make it more versed for the need of trust in these models that we have nowadays. Okay, I think I can switch with this. Yeah. So again, why is it important to understand the basics and not just how to use these tools? The importance is that these tools are rapidly evolving, and there's a lot of need for auditing these models. And if not us, who? We are sort of like invested with the responsibility as scientists to analyze these models and understand what can go wrong and provide guarantees. Which doesn't mean that when a model is released, we have to guarantee that it's always going to work perfectly. The idea is to give a sort of confidence to the user that nothing major, nothing catastrophic may happen. This is fundamental, because otherwise we will never have models that scale up to the needs of industry or education. So again, it's important to acquire skills on the tools that are already available. It's even more important to acquire lower level skills that will allow us to make an impact on what is yet to come in the AI world. Okay, so again, everything is fantastic. We're in the era of generative AI. It looks like every answer is just one click away, but there are some open issues that were open decades ago and are still open, if not exacerbated by these new technologies. And two of these issues, there are many. I can count at least 15 off the top of my head. But two of the main issues that are important to me, important to society, and that I've decided to invest most of my time on are privacy and fairness and their entanglement when it comes to AI. These issues, these are challenges that are very hard to solve. I would say that there's no real final solution. The problem is still very open. It really depends on the specific application. But what we have is quite good, I would say, idea on how to model this problem mathematically. And when you have a good mathematical problem, it's usually maybe not easy but possible to adapt it to any situation. Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper. Why is privacy important? Well, we know that when we use these models, when we query some system from any generative model that we can think of, DALL-E, GPT, anything you can think of, there's always the risk that either a malicious actor or even the company that provides the service itself may store some of our data. Every day we use our phones and we send messages, and in principle, all this information that flows from one terminal to the other could be stored somewhere, and who knows, one day it could be used against us, or it could be used for market purposes, which has already happened. And so it's the idea is to you want to provide a product and also provide some guarantees to the user that their privacy is not going to be completely forgotten. And the topic of privacy is so important that, if it happened to me recently, when you turn on a new terminal, a new laptop, or a new phone, you always see, at least like from certain companies, you always see a page that says your data is going to be treated according to the principle of differential privacy, which is something that I'm going to discuss in a few slides. And these are keywords that have become necessary in the industry, because otherwise it's impossible for a product to be sold, because it wouldn't abide by state and national regulations. Okay, so let's get even a little deeper into privacy. Again, like, there are so many different flavors of privacy. There are so many different point of view that you can look at privacy, or the privacy issue in industry. And what I'm gonna consider today are two different kind of privacy. One is differential privacy, which is what we can call privacy through the model. It's not exactly right, but you'll see what I mean. And privacy, like data privacy, which is basically privacy applied directly on the data, which is, I guess, achieved. I think the main solution for this kind of privacy is cryptography. So the idea in differential privacy is that you put something in between the provider and the data that sort of alters the data, or some query to the data, so that the provider cannot see exactly what the user submitted. In the case of cryptography, this is already applied to the data. So the plain text of my messages, the plain text of my medical checkup are never shared with a third party that provides the service, but only something that has been locked. And remember this word, locked. Only something that has been locked is going to be shared with the service provider. Okay, let's look a little bit at what I said about differential privacy. So I said that there's something in between the data and the service provider that is going to generate privacy for my data. And I don't want to go too much into the the technicalities for this topic, but the idea is that what differential privacy guarantees, like mathematically guarantees, so it's 100% certain that if differential privacy is implemented correctly, you are going to get this benefit, is that an adversary will never be able to distinguish two data sets that have one different record. This means that if I have a data set, okay, and I don't know, for instance, the Netflix data set with all the reviews for the movies, and I add my review, the queries that a potential malicious actor can do communicating with this data set, they're never going to reveal the fact that I was not in that data set before I added my last review. So this is very important, because basically what it's telling you is that analyzing a data set should not reveal if a new person added their data to the data set. Okay, what about cryptography? As I said before, the point with cryptography is we don't want to rely on a model. We never want to share the plain text. So the idea is that my message or my medical checkup are never going to be shared with the service provider. What is suggested by cryptography instead is that we create a new version of this data, and that's what we're going to communicate to the provider. And how do we create this new version? This new version is a version that shouldn't be very correlated with the original version, because otherwise it would be just like looking at the plain text. But at the same time, it has to be correlated, because we need to guarantee that some operations will yield the same result. So the idea, and I guess this image is pretty self-explanatory, is that cryptography provides you with a case, and only the person that sends the message and the targeted receiver have the key to decrypt this message. So everything that has been that is seen within the case that is locked by these keys is basically nonsense to anyone, except to the people that can open the secret case with the two keys. Okay. Again, why do we need privacy? That, I guess, at this point is pretty clear. We need privacy because people need to trust the service provider and the models that the service provider gives in like in your app, in your phone, in your browser. But this is not enough because sometimes applying privacy only yields certain guarantees for certain groups. So the idea is that we would like, for instance, if we use ChatGPT, we would like ChatGPT to be equally performant for all ethnic groups. And there are a lot of studies, mostly empirical, that show that, for instance, like if you're an average user and you type questions in English, you get a good amount of good generations. If you start typing in a different language, since the training has been done mostly on a English corpus, those answers are not going to be as good as like the average user that speaks and writes in English. So how do we get together these two concepts where we want to have privacy for each user, but also guarantee a fair service for each group? As you can imagine, the problem is everything but simple. There's been at least 10 years of research ongoing only for problems related to privacy and fairness in AI. Of course, there are other disciplines that are interested in the same problems and may use similar or completely different approaches. So again, like this is very, very important. I hope I convinced you of this. Okay, but what is fairness? Again, as I said, fairness, being fair, means that independently on the chunk of population that is trying to access or use a certain service, that service should provide the same quality, or at least the same quality up to a certain interval of variance. We don't want to have subpopulations that are completely disregarded when a service is published. Okay, so again, these issues are already present. Sometimes they're present in the very data. I don't know, for instance, if we collect data on car purchases, of course there's going to be a very different amount of data and a very significant difference in the data that we collect from rich countries with respect to poor countries. But at the same time, we would like to guarantee that the model is trained enough and well enough to respond properly to both kind of populations. And this is also where bias comes into the game. Bias is a sort of specific kind of unfairness, and is where a model is biased towards a certain population with respect to a different one, and where the performance of the model clearly advantage one population and not the other. Again, like these issues have been there since the dawn of times, but machine learning tends to exacerbate these problems because these mathematical models are huge and they're not perfect. And then at the same time, the other issue is that more and more people have access to this technology rather than other technologies back in a few decades ago. Okay, so like just to give you a few examples, where can we see fairness or lack thereof? Content suggestion. Like if you're in a rich country where you can have a lot of feedback between what you buy, what you would like to buy, where you spend your money, you can get a lot of good feedback for your requests. But this is not the case in poorer countries. And for instance, when I look at this problem, one of the examples that come to mind is also recidivism prediction, which is basically at some point in the US, the law system decided to create a database to predict if a person was more or less likely to end up in jail a second or a third time after their first time in jail. And the data set, which is called Compass, has become a sort of, like an anecdote because it's completely skewed towards certain subpopulation with respect to others. This is a problem that is inherent to data. There are clearly some classes that are easier to distinguish because of something that you may have heard in your AI course if someone took an AI course, which is linear separability. But machine learning tries to naturally exacerbates this problem even more. And when you have an approximation of your model that is not exact, these issues are still there and are sort of magnified. And my job, or at least part of my job, is to make sure that we put a patch on these, and we try to guarantee that you can have privacy and fairness at the same time. Again, this is not easy. There's a lot of research that is ongoing. The problem is still everything but closed. So we should expect a lot of more work in the coming months and years, especially when we have this clear trend of generative AI gaining ground on so many different aspects of our economy and daily life. The other problem is that we said that machine learning gets these problems that are already present in our data and exacerbates them. Part of my research unveiled that actually when you try to combine together privacy and fairness needs, this becomes even more evident. You try to plug in privacy, it's much easier to have good performance and privacy guarantees for certain groups rather than with respect to others. And this is where we're trying to put a patch. In particular, one of my last papers investigates what happens when you're trying to use machine learning models with encrypted data, and you first want to audit the fairness guarantees for these models, and where these guarantees are not exactly what you want, what you would expect, how you can patch and mitigate any kind of problems that may surface in the case. And the key question that I asked myself with my co-authors and that I'm going to talk about in the next few slides is there an instance at least where ensuring privacy generates a reduction in the fairness capability of the model? And the answer is yes. This was already observed partially with differential privacy. The kind of privacy that I'm considering in this case is encryption. So in other words, masking data before we release them to the provider. Does this practice create more unfairness between different subgroups of a population? Again, I don't want to be too technical, but if anyone has some notion of models, neural network models, the idea is that the deeper, the better, and the wider, the better. And the third component is what functions you're using. Functions are what basically define your border between classes. The better, the more powerful the functions that you use, the more complex spaces you can model, and you can be better at separating different classes. What was observed is that if we try to take standard model that you can download from the internet, and you try to apply that model to a situation where you need to use encrypted data, so cryptography as your privacy protocol, the amount of time that you need to wait to get an inference skyrockets. It becomes prohibitively high. We're talking about, just let me give you a few examples. If you use a DenseNet 121 on Cipher 10, the basic model DenseNet and one of the most basic data set, you can get an inference in less than 1 second. When you use Cipher 10 with the same model and Cipher 10 is encrypted, we're talking about 20 minutes on an average GPU. I can give you better numbers if you're interested, but the idea is that this is something that impacts everyone's life. Now, if a hospital, if a bank wants to do some inference with encrypted data, you're gonna incur higher costs because you need more time to give the same answer and providing privacy at the same time. So something that some people came up with as a solution was, well, okay, maybe these super powerful models that we're using are sort of like cannon when you try to shoot a fly. So what can be done? And like a straightforward answer is, well, let's reduce nonlinearities, which translated into, I would say, day-to-day lingo means let's make the models less complex. Let's take these very complicated functions, let's replace them with something that is much, much simpler to compute so that we get speed up, and hopefully, we didn't need all those complex functions before, so we're gonna get a drop in performance, but this drop is not gonna be catastrophic. Okay, let me give you an example. So let's suppose that we have two classes. The two classes are represented by the color red and blue. And these classes are modeled so that the perfect separation hyperplane, so your decision boundary, as you may call it, which is basically the line that tells you, red on the right and blue on the left, is given by the dotted line. Okay, and now we train a model, and the model is going to try to understand how to model this separation hyperplane, this boundary. And we have two options. On the left-hand side of this slide, we have the model that use a lot of nonlinearities. So we can see that the faded blue and red colors, which represent the decision of the model, are not exactly, perfectly what the separation hyperplane, the dotted line, represents, but they're much, much, much more closer than what we see on the right-hand picture, where I'm removing nonlinearity, so I'm just using linear functions, and I'm trying to model the same dotted curve. And basically, as we can see, I don't know if I can point with this thing, but yeah. So what we're seeing is that in this region here, and in this region here, my model that is more simple, more linearized, makes a lot more mistakes because a lot of red dots are predicted as blue. And something else that I wanted to stress here is that the blue and the red are called minority and majority class because it's hard to see this from this picture, but trust me, the number of blue points is 10 times the number of red points. Okay, so if there's one thing that I want you to take home from this picture is that, and you can mathematically prove this, when you have two populations which make up a very unbalanced data set, because you have one population represented about 10 times more than the other, if your model becomes smaller and your performance go down, the class that will pay most of it is the red class, the class that is the minority one. Why? Because you're trying to minimize the global risk, so it's better to make a mistake on the red than on the blue. As simple as that. Okay, so yeah, I guess I pretty much explained these slides already. So again, the model is trying to replicate the dotted line. If you allow the model to be very complex, you get pretty good approximation of the dotted line. When you start removing complexity from the functions inside, like under the hood of your model, you start discriminating or having bias against the red class, which is the minority one. Okay, and so how does this connect to the idea of controlling a model? What can we do from the model point of view? Well, what can be done and what we observed is that it's possible to describe the different performance between the models that are very complex and models that have been simplified, through a few mathematical tools, and in particular, the distance between the weights of your model. So if you take the parameters of your model, which is what dictates, the functions inside your model what to do, what we observe is that the more we reduce this nonlinearity, so the more we simplify our model, so in this picture is from the left to the right, the more there's a gap between the parameters of the model. So this means that your the fingerprint of the model changes a lot when you remove nonlinearities. And one can ask, okay, what is the consequence of these? Again, these are plots where we observe things, but there's a mathematical formulation that supports these results. What we observe is that the more the model is simplified. So in this picture, we go from the right to the left. So here, when we have 80%, it means that only 20% of the model has been simplified. When we have 2%, it means that 98% of the model has been modified. What we see is that if we look at the global accuracy, sure, there is some loss. We go from about 97% to a little more than 96% in global accuracy. So yeah, we do lose about 1 percentage point, but that's not a big deal because we have guaranteed more privacy with these. However, if we now look at the group granularity, you probably can already see that there's a big difference. So we have a majority group. In this case, this is a data set that is used for census. What we can see is that the majority of the data, which are people aged between 18 and 64, basically have observed no consequence. So we see that when we reduce the number of nonlinearities, pretty much all these bars here stay in the same place. Now, if we go to the group 13 to 17, which is the minority group, so the group with less data to represent this group within the set of data that we're using, what we observe is that the initial bar is much higher than the final one, showing that now when I want to guarantee privacy on this group, the final performance at inference time on this group is also going to be extremely affected. And in particular, here we're considering the accuracy, so how many correct predictions I have for each group. You will see that, of course, we start from a lower amount of good prediction with respect to the majority class, which is fine. That's what we expect from the nature of the data, because, as I said before, there are data that are harder to distinguish, harder to classify. But overall, the drop is much higher here. Okay. And so we observed this issue, and we asked ourselves, what can be done? And again, I'm going to stay away from the technicalities, but the idea is that probably some of you have heard of gradient descent, which is the way these models are optimized. And the idea is that gradient descent is pretty useful, because if you have a function that you want to optimize and another function that you want to use to drive your learning, then you can add as many functions as you want to regularize your learning, and you just need to create a convex combination, which is super easy. Nowadays, it's super easy to optimize. So basically what we did here, we added a budget, a cost for incorrect classifications on minority groups. And basically the takeaway from this this slide is that if you compare before and after the mitigation, now we have a big drop with respect to the model that uses less values, less nonlinearities with respect to the initial one, which is what we see in these two figures. But then after the mitigation, if we compare the new mitigated model, which is also a simple model that we can use for cryptographic inference, and we compare this with the model before the mitigation, now we see that the drop in accuracy is negative, meaning that we now have a more private, a faster model that we can use with private data, encrypted data, and at the same time we can gain from the point of view of fairness. And yeah, so the idea is that can we have, in general, fairness and privacy together? Yes, there is always a trade-off that comes from the way we model privacy and fairness. But it's also true that if someone cares, if a company cares, they can put money in to improve their model, not only from the point of view of the performance for the majority, but also with some idea of ethical competition that basically can allow these models to be not only efficient, not only good at inferring what the customers want, but they can also be better over different and underrepresented groups. So again, to link this presentation with the main topic of this symposium, artificial intelligence has an enormous potential in education. I firmly believe that having it is an asset is not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, most of it depends on how it's used. Shouldn't be used to cheat, or shouldn't be used with no discrimination, just accepting both good and bad generations or good or bad answers. We should always keep a critical mind when dealing with AI. And as we move forward, it's very important to evaluate, do auditing, and make sure that these models not only provide good generations or good inference for privileged group or overrepresented groups. And this is where you guys, you students mostly, come into the game, because there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot that can be improved. And I believe that these, balancing privacy and fairness in the era of generation is going to be very important, because sooner or later these models are going to be connected to the way we vote, to the way we analyze election data, and we want to make sure that whatever statistics and whatever decisions that come from those statistics, we want to make sure that they're both good, accurate, but also respectful of all groups and ethnicities, religions, genders, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I guess, as I say in my last point, I guess that, AI was, and remains, a force for good in education. We just need to make sure that, we use this tool to the best of our abilities and without leaving anyone behind. And yeah, that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
So what do we do next? I mean, we have a presentation, so then we have 3 faculty discussing education, discussing security, and so forth. You go there?
If there are no more PowerPoints,
No,
you go up on stage to discuss.
there is no more PowerPoint. We hope everybody is still awake. Okay, he's taking a drink here.
Yep.
Tables.
So just a couple of words about what you just saw dealing with artificial intelligence by and large. My name is Scott Jeffries, and I've been a professor here at Hofstra University for about 10 years now. I spent 35 plus years in the computer science industry, actually cutting code on Wall Street and then joining cybersecurity interests about 20 years ago. I think by and large, the cybersecurity industry is far, far behind where we need to be in artificial intelligence. The AI models that you saw Marco discussing just a few minutes ago have launched and have revolutionized a lot of what you're seeing in education. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't think that some of you in the audience today have visited a ChatGPT site and typed in the old essay question that you got from your English course and maybe got a couple of ideas from that. Okay, I see some smiles in the audience. I can imagine that you've tried that. And your answers probably came out to be fairly successful. That's probably a very mundane case of what we're talking about here. What we're talking about are deep fakes. We're talking about, as you've probably seen recently, Taylor Swift being artificially generated to be endorsing various political candidates and such. These are pretty serious threats to our voting infrastructure and how we are positioning ourselves as an educated populace when it comes to voting. We're having the very foundations of what we watch and what we see challenged. And certainly, the politics that we're seeing right now between the various factions, regardless of which way you choose to vote, have become fairly aggressive and fairly offensive to some in terms of what they're indicating the general population looks like. The point is that in cybersecurity, we've done an absolutely terrible job keeping up with just malware, much less getting in front of the AI trend. Certainly some of you are probably aware of what took place this summer with CrowdStrike. If you had a Hofstra University PC, you probably experienced it firsthand. And in the case of CrowdStrike, here we have a company where a single engineer makes a single mistake and literally brings down 8.5 million personal computers and devices around the globe, literally within a 60-minute time frame. So as a cybersecurity person, I look at that and say, if I was sitting in the audience right now, I'm looking at a very fragile infrastructure on a good day, and here we are chasing technology that's wildly out of control. I think we have some challenges in the cybersecurity industry to catch up to where artificial intelligence is. And more importantly, from a voting perspective, we have every responsibility to convince the general populace, young people like yourselves, that the voting environment is safe and secure, private and fair, which gets challenged constantly, as you're well aware, with accusations of tainted elections, rigged elections, etc. So we need to be pretty careful in our steps forward about when we use loaded terms like that in terms of evaluating the election cycles and such. But at the end of the day, the point of my little expose here is that the cybersecurity industry is behind the curve. And as much as we try to keep yourselves protected from a technology perspective, we're actually not in front of the curve on AI. And that's the real risk to our election future going forward, in my perspective. Yeah?
Scary, but something for all of us to think about. Before we start with questions, we just have one last topic. We would like to circle back from where Professor Romanelli started his talk about education in computer science. And I would like to share with the students in the audience in particular, and I know some students in computer science, but historically, if you want to put in perspective, the first computer science department in the United States was basically formed in 1962 in Purdue University. At the same time, there were emerging multiple, so it's a contestant, which one is the first. At Stanford, the University of Chicago, Illinois. At Hofstra, we actually have in the bulletin for the first time computer science appearing in 1974. And in 1974, the first ACM chapter, student chapter, was formed. So I'm very proud to say that our students have been very engaged and active. I also did ChatGPT, and searched for when was the Hofstra Computer Science Department founded, and it came in 1970. So I actually could not find myself any data, but it will be interesting to see if ChatGPT was right, that is 1970 and not 1974.
I was a student here at Hofstra. I sat where you sat, literally in this room. Okay, I'm a 1982 Hofstra University graduate, and I often like to say to my students, I'll save you the calculation. That makes me 63 or older than dirt. You can choose. I started here in '79, so I remember the computer science department when it was first founded, and the idea of computer science professors didn't exist. I was taught by electrical engineers.
Well,
there was no programming teachers at the time.
Well, what happens is computer science department either outgrew from mathematics department or from electrical engineering.
Yeah.
This is how they come. If they come from mathematics department, in many schools, the computer science departments are in the School of Arts and Sciences. When I outgrew from electrical engineering, they're in the School of Engineering. In Hofstra, we had something totally new and original. We had a department in computer science. I don't know when it was founded exactly, approximately 50 years ago. And it is, I found it in the bulletin.
Did you really just say 50 years ago? I feel so old.
Yes,
I
I
really
did.
feel old. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I thought, my God, what did
You're
I
right.
say? Yes, I did say. And we had actually, about 12 years ago, the administration and the Faculty of Computer Science and of Computer Engineering departments at Hofstra, which are at the time part of the college, of the Hofstra College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, we worked basically and formed a school. So the school was formed 10 years ago approximately, and it has the engineering department and the computer science department. And computer science is discipline, so has its roots in mathematics and in engineering. So it is an applied science. So if you think about computer science curriculum, traditionally you think about theory, systems, software, and hardware or computer organization and architecture. Because everything is changing so rapidly, and given the recent changes in AI and so forth, the big professional society, the IEEE Computer Societies, Association for Computer Machinery, ACM, and Association for Advancement Artificial Intelligence, they basically had a joint task force, and in 2024, this is very fresh, in June, they came with a new framework and guidelines for a computer science curriculum. So the idea, we want to prepare the students for now and for the future, to be equipped with the knowledge and with the competencies they need to have. What is interesting to me when I read these guidelines, the main points I just want to emphasize for you, is it seems that at Hofstra we are actually forward thinking. We already have implemented some of this or are on a path finishing them. Something that is, let's look at my notes, that is, forget about notes, something that is big emphasis compared to previous curriculum is on interdisciplinary. And this is already reflected in the fact that we do have interdisciplinary program, like our computer engineering interdisciplinary. We have program in cognitive science, which is interdisciplinary between psychology, philosophy, linguistics, computer science, and so forth. We have the new working on a new program in data science, which is interdisciplinary with mathematics. The new wrinkle is really the establishment with bridges in computer science. So it is recognized that the computer science as a discipline, and especially now with AI, has basically branched into all sphere of society. So naturally, the computing education has to be interdisciplinary in nature and provides various paths for students. So we as a department are really in a process of looking at our curriculum, aligning it. It's already, I'm very glad to say that it's already on very good foundations, but we are actually aligning it further with these new guidelines and framework. Another important point is the really big emphasis on ethics in the profession. And we used to have a course, Professor Jeffrey is teaching it often, or computing ethics in society. But now the emphasis on ethics, from what Professor Romanelli's presentation was, from what Scott was saying, I hope you realize that it's actually extremely important that you as a student, that this could be computer science students or any one of your students, any work that you do, any product, any essay that you write, any code that you write, you should take ownership and responsibility that this is actually serving somebody in society and the effects it would have.
I was just going to say, computer science is at a really weird place in the world when it comes to talking about ethics. And what do I mean by that? If you were to be ill and go to the doctor this afternoon, you certainly want to go to a practitioner who's licensed here in the state of New York, and you guarantee that through their medical training and through their boards that they have been certified to meet certain standards. If you are looking to cross the Verrazano Narrows Bridge traveling to New Jersey over the weekend, you certainly want to know that the engineers who built that bridge understand all of the principles about the 40 billion cars that run over it and seem to always be stuck on it as you're driving over to New Jersey. Anybody who does the drive is smiling right now, yeah? You want to know that that engineering staff has a professional licensing associated with it. The fact that we're sitting in this building and we look at the new building that computer science just built, the Science and Innovation Center, you want to know that the architects who were behind that building were licensed, et cetera, yeah? And as a result, okay, the important piece of that is that in computer science, we don't have that kind of licensing board. So in computer science, anybody who hangs out a shingle that they want to program, okay, they're okay. They can do it. And it's up to us as consumers to decide who the good programmers are and the bad programmers are. We don't have an ethical board aside from holding each other's feet to the fire. A pretty interesting difference, right? So when you're seeing things about artificial intelligence and the like, remember, there is no professional licensing that sits behind us. Okay, we're apt to police each other, which differentiates computer science in a lot of ways from other professional disciplines. Yeah, pretty important point.
Just stop here.
It's true.
We do have the professional society, the ACM, the IEEE.
It's not it's not a licensing board, though, right? In other words, you can't practice medicine in New York without a license. You can't be a nurse without a license. But we allow anybody to cut code, right? It's true.
Okay. You're the industry person. I'm not into licensing. So anyway, this actually discussion kind of deviates a little bit, but I really wanted to emphasize to you that you should actually take ownership of what you do and be responsible. And so with this said, actually, we should probably...
Unless there are questions from you folks.
Open for questions.
So as a follow-up to the exciting exchange between two of you, Professor Jeffries, then our students who are going to be hopefully the people who are going to be that first generation who are going to create that licensing, they're going to raise the bar higher. Can you elaborate on why it's important for them to get a very well-rounded education so they can be making policy decision with the same comfort that they can make the technical decision? And why is it important for them then not just to be focused on technical degrees, which is going to help us catapult them to the first job, but to have that other durable skills which enable them to be a player in making the policy, so they're not impacted by a third-party politician imposing policy on us, which could be to the detriment of our profession?
one of the advantages, and this is going to sound like a sales pitch and he threw me a softball, right? One of the advantages you have at Hofstra is the fact that even though you get a technical degree in computer science or a related discipline, the underscoring of Hofstra is that we are a liberal arts institution. And your ability to write and effectively communicate, your ability to have a more global view is going to help you in any business circumstance you're in. In computer science, it's no secret that the movement to offshore development and the like has increased over the past 3 decades. Why? Because we can get cheaper, better talented individuals, perhaps in other parts of the globe. And when you can pay at a corporate level 30 cents on the dollar as opposed to paying full freight, the question is, what advantage do we have remaining in the United States then for people that we're training? And the answer is that your ability to have a global view, your ability to write and articulate well technical solutions, your ability to critically analyze situations can only be learned effectively in a university that has a strong liberal arts program. It's not just a technology discipline, it's not just a medical discipline, it comes from having a strong foundational liberal arts education. So I would argue to Dean Rabbani that at the end of the day, the positioning that we have at Hofstra University is a unique advantage, and you're leveraging it. You will see that benefit as you start moving into the workforce because you have a broader, more world-recognized set of skills than perhaps just a technology set that you'd find at a technical school. So thank you for the question.
If I can add on to that for 1 second. I
Sure.
totally agree with what you said. So, my name's Dennis Ashby. I'm actually a Hofstra graduate. I'm part of the advisory board for the Computer Science and Engineering organization, and I'm actually in town this week because I'm receiving an Alumni Achievement Award. Thank you. So, what you just said, I wholeheartedly support. So I work as VP of partnerships and what's called customer experience for a startup out in the Valley. So I actually flew from California, so I live just in Silicon Valley, back here home to New York to be here this week. And so I was listening to what you just said, and I've got a 19-year-old daughter who's a junior at San Francisco State University, which I'm trying to correct, trying to get her to come here to Hofstra for her graduate education. But one of the things she's always asked me is, how did you go from having a career as a developer, right? When I graduated Hofstra, the only thing I wanted to do was code. But how'd you go from there to the role you're in now? How'd you go from there to, prior to joining this startup, I was VP of sales at IBM for like 10 years or so. So how'd you do that? What's been the most defining thing in your career? And my answer to her and my answer to this organization, this body, is simple. It is being well-rounded in your education. Probably one of the best things I did when I was here at Hofstra was I discovered the philosophy department. I discovered how to think. I discovered different patterns of thinking. I think one of the biggest things, the company that I work for today, we're based in AI. Everything we do is based around very complex AI models and machine learning. Without a good basis of ethics, without a good basis of ethical thinking and logical thinking, critically thinking, the world that this student body is going to inherit is going to be very challenging. The thing that's going to differentiate you and your computer science background, your computer science degree and your career is going to be your ability to be ethical, but also to communicate. To be able to take really complex thoughts, really complex things that the world really has never seen before, because it's changing. Every couple of days, I see something that I've never thought was possible. But then being able to take that and understand how to communicate that in plain English to a world that's not ready for it, but then also be able to make the ethical decisions on what's right and what's not right. The challenge with AI is really simple. It's kind of the challenge that Prometheus had. We're giving the gift of fire to a world that, by and large, is not ready for it. As a member of the computer science and engineering world, we kind of have to be the self-appointed guardians of that fire. We have to be able to say and police ourselves to say this is ethically not right, but then you also have to be able to think through the conclusions of that. So it's kind of a very large responsibility that we have. It's also kind of cool. It's a great time to be alive. So completely agree with what you were saying.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, I just thought about something else that I... Sure, yeah. Can you come to the mic because they're recording?
This is the long walk, right? Everybody's eyes are on her.
I'm Kyra. I'm a mass media major. I think a lot of us over here are in the communication building, so this is kind of like far field for us, I guess, in a lot of ways, what we were learning today. And I think my main question, I think a lot of us probably have the same question, being PR majors, mass media, communication, film, what is it that we need to focus on when it comes to AI? Because right now we've been learning about deep fakes, we've been learning about in the more political and economic sphere of things of how AI and just in general how media literacy is so important to understand what's going on, and we kind of get that from the communication and literacy side of things. So when you're bringing in AI and policy, and when you were showing those graphs of understanding that, I was kind of understanding what you were saying, like if you have a minority group and they're kind of being left, like you're changing algorithms and different things, and then although the majority might be fine, when you change that, then the minority is still being left out of that equation. So how do we write about that, or how do we kind of target that for our audience of people and understanding from the media literacy perspective?
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, really happy that the message went through. That's exactly the core of what I was discussing. I'm happy that it was clear. And to your point, I'm just gonna be very brief, but I'm gonna talk about something that I experienced beforehand. Firsthand. So when I was back in France at some point, I was in I don't know what would be the equivalent here in the US, but it's what is called a national lab, I guess.
Yeah, we have national labs.
So the idea is that, periodically we had to show the government that was financing us, why they should keep financing us. And I really had some of the hardest times in my life trying to explain to policymaker what you can or cannot translate into laws. We have something in Europe that is called GDPR. You probably heard of it, of something like that. There's something similar in California, and I think pretty much the rest of the world is going to catch up at some point.
GDPR is privacy restrictions
exactly.
in
So,
European theory.
Yeah. So these are like policies and guidelines that should, tell policymakers and legislators how to write the next set of rules so that you sort of take into account all these problems. And the main issues that we have as computer scientists is that I have a feeling, and it's not even a feeling, it's more than a feeling because that's what people told me. We struggle and we're very unsuccessful at communicating what our numbers and our equations should, imply from the political point of view. So, to answer your question, I guess we definitely need a middleman, someone that can understand the core problem and translate it to, for people that do not have the time, do not have the background to, take a research, which is, as someone was saying, probably looks like a leap into the future. How do we make these plots that are just like plots on a paper? How do we make it relevant for laws and for policies, and I guess that's where you probably can step in and help us sort of like translate what can be done into what should be done.
It's kind of like when you try to do a patent, right? When you have a new idea that you want to patent, right? As a technology person, I don't know how to apply for a patent with the government. You have lawyers to do that, and somehow I have to get technical ideas into the lawyer's head to write it in the correct form that can be submitted as a patent. I don't know how to do that, and he doesn't know what I do. So somehow in the middle we have to find that common place. I think you're raising that exact same point, and I think Marco hits on it, right? That being able to translate very technical material into something that is PR related, that you can actually synthesize and communicate a message about, I think we struggle with that a lot. And I think that's a great role for you folks if you can take the first step with us towards being more technology based, right? We can take the first step to trying to be more PR based, yeah? I think it's that middle ground that there's real opportunity.
Well, there is an organization in computer science called Computing Research Association. And one of the main tasks, actually, they have flying into Congress. They organized targeted meeting to go in Washington, D.C., meet with government, with congressmen, exactly to explain issues, being in robotics, being in cybersecurity, AI, and the government is not just coming up with decisions and with laws just on their own. They do actually have an informed decision from the computing professionals. Another thing that I think is very important is that, yes, it's reading, writing, communication, but this computing literacy has to be there. All of us are living in this world, and I don't mean about how to type on a computer, but how to behave on an internet, on social media, what to trust, what is secure, what is not secure, and to know what the boundaries, what the limitations are. I have a sister, she's my age in Bulgaria, sending me important documents over email. Just sending it like this. And I said, how can you do this? I'm going to delete them right now. This was her solution. So, we should actually, you as students, we should have this education. Everybody should know what can you trust, what can you do, because it is missing right now. And if you have to function in this society, you have to know.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. And I guess we're done, right on time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott.
I think that the fact that the message that you communicated about the bias that's in the data
really
and
happy.
groups,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
the fact that that message came across is very,